Prefer to listen on the go? Find the audio version of Katie Prentiss' Sunshine Soul wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Katie Prentiss, and this is Sunshine Soul. I remember flying out of Portland one gray morning. It had been raining for days. That kind of heavy, wet Pacific Northwest gray that just seeps into your bones. I had the window seat on the plane like always. And as we ascended, I watched the droplets race across the glass. The clouds outside were so thick, like walls. And for a moment, it felt like the sun just didn't even exist anymore. And then we broke through. Probably my favorite moment. The clouds fell away, and there it was. Blue sky, bright light, the sun just sitting there like it had been the whole time. And it hit me in that moment. The sun is always shining, even when we can't see it. Here at Sunshine Soul, we hope, we heal, and we love despite the clouds. We remember that there's light ahead. Welcome to Sunshine Soul. Let's keep looking for the light together. In our last episode, we talked about my mom and how her death has just been this unraveling for me, and how it's been this exploration into the way we think about our moms. And here I am sitting before you, a mother of 4 children. It's not lost on me that I am that figure that Nick Kroll jokes about to 4 amazing people in this world. It's so fascinating how I can be that person to these other individuals. The irony of doing this podcast right now, or I should say the beauty and wildness of doing this podcast right now in life, is that we are facing our very youngest child as a senior in high school. We're about to graduate, the youngest of 4. We have been in this journey. The last 10 years of my life have just been this wild unraveling, so to speak. You know, Brene Brown talks about midlife not being a crisis, but an unraveling, how it's a series of events. And I feel that to be so true in my life. So much identity shifting, changes, constant changes and evolutions of the way we live life. You can see it even in our home with how much furniture our home is absorbing from different apartments and dorms and moving situations of our kids. But all of that to say is motherhood to me, I think there's no better explanation of motherhood than a contraction and expansion. I was talking with someone recently, and they were talking about how all of life is about contraction and expansion. The whole world is moving in this contraction and expansion. We see it in the ocean. We see it in our weather patterns and our seasons. We feel it in labor and delivery. I feel it in the chapters and seasons of my life. I shared how I felt like my mom's life was contracting so much as she aged. In my life, I feel like there's so much expansion happening, but you can't have one without the other. You have to contract before you expand. And just like my journey with my mom was an experience of sacrificial love and caregiving, so has that been true for me and my journey into motherhood. Episode 2, Mother Me. Even at a young age, I was a kid who wanted to be a mom. I remember in high school, thinking that I wanted to have 4 kids. I don't know if that's a normal experience at all, but that was my experience. I was a middle of 3 children myself, and maybe perhaps because I was a middle child, I was determined to rectify that odd man out, middle child invisibility feeling that we sometimes have. I knew 4 just felt like this perfect balance. It felt like there could always be some sort of partnership happening between 2 people at the same time. and nobody was a true middle child in our family. So I got married to my sweet husband, Brian. And I remember when we were first married thinking we'd talk about kids. We were excited about having children. But you have this question of when do you think we'll be ready to have kids? And to me, it's just a comedic question because who in their right mind feels ready to take the full responsibility of another human being? Who feels ready for that? What does ready even mean? I think to a lot of people, it means that you have enough money in your bank account to start saving for their college. We were not in that group. Unfortunately, sorry, kids. But what does ready even mean? Like, does it mean, sure, you have a house or you have a stable job, but all of those things can change. Does it mean you're emotionally mature? Like, who's emotionally mature? We were in our 20s when we had kids. I don't know if they talk about your frontal cortex being not fully formed until your 30s for men, right? So we were having children as children, but I remember us talking about wanting kids, and you hear so many stories of people really struggling to get pregnant or how it can take years for some folks. And so we thought, well, I don't think we'll ever feel fully ready. And two, it could take a while. So maybe we'll go ahead and start trying, which means stop trying to avoid it. So for us, our first pregnancy happened fairly quickly. So we were like, oh, that worked. And we found ourselves pregnant with our first son. Nicholas Andrew we were given the due date of January 1st, 2000. And we kind of laughed at that date. And for me, my biggest concern as a mom was like, I really hope he's not born on Christmas because one, we really love the name Nicholas and that could get really awkward for him for years from now. And two, I don't really want to have to separate birthday and Christmas at the same day. That would be really hard for a kid. You can tell I'm a birthday fanatic, right? Just by even having that concern. But as time moved forward in the pregnancy, so did the famous Y2K panic that we were experiencing in that time. For those of you who may not have lived through that, there was this huge panic that once the date stamp in all of our computer systems turned over to 2000, that our whole infrastructure would crumble because none of the settings were prepared for it to go to a 2000 number, which is so funny and sounds so archaic. But all that to say, there was a lot of buzz happening in the world about how we just weren't sure if all systems would crash. My OBGYN assured me that they had generators at the hospital and we would be fine. I laughed at the whole thing because I was nervous about Y2K, but I laughed about the concern about having a child on January 1st, 2000, because that was my actual due date and nobody has their babies on their due dates, right? Except for me. I did. The night, New Year's Eve, December 31st, the night before the Y2K whatever was supposed to happen, I started feeling labor pains. Thankfully, that happened after midnight. It was already the new year. And I remember waking up to a contraction and thinking, do our lights work? Is our power out? Like, does everything work? And everything was fine. So we went into labor. Nicholas Prentiss was born the next morning. And I think that it's so funny when you get pregnant with your first child. It's unfortunate, but a lot of people give you really discouraging words. They say like, well, sleep while you can. Well, enjoy your marriage while you still have time. they kind of like, I don't know, they project like some of the harder parts of parenting onto you as you're walking around with your big pregnancy belly. And I just find that really unfortunate because I will say for me, the most profound thing that happened when I saw, probably before I even saw Nick, but for sure the first time you hold your baby, is I just remember thinking like, I didn't know that my heart could grow. I didn't know that my heart could expand. Not only that, not only seeing my own capacity to love grow, but also watching my husband see and embrace our child for the first time. My love for him expanded as well. I thought like, this is, I laugh now because we were both such kids, but I'm like, this young boy, this young man as a father, seeing a father's love pour out of him was a really profound, beautiful thing that I feel like united us even more deeply, rather than all the naysayers saying like your marriage is going to suffer from having a child. It was wild. It was wild to know that it's wild to know that our bodies have the capacity to make another human being. Like, how is that? And I think it connects me so much to like the whole animal world. Like there's this whole like fascinating piece of another human coming from your body and then needing your body to sustain its life is wildly fascinating. But I think the emotional soul connection of it all is just how intricately entwined you feel as your whole being with this child. And as your heart grows and expands, and as you realize, wow, I didn't realize I had the capacity to love in this way, you also realize that you have the capacity to be hurt more deeply than you've ever experienced, because now there's something outside of you that you would do anything to protect and care for. And so it's a very vulnerable, soft feeling to have your child walking around in the world. After we had Nicholas and life started to settle down, a whole 9 months after life started settling down, we felt like it's so interesting with your firstborn. You feel like everything they do is so profound and new, and you're so scared of everything. You think like, oh, this choice of what we feed them for lunch might create this destiny of utmost success or utter failure, depending on what we feed them or what we read, how we read to them, or when they start walking. It's insane, the pressure we put on ourselves. But life starts to settle. He started sleeping through the night. We had our routines. We had the 2 naps of the day going, and like Brian and I got our evenings back together, and we thought, we should have another one. This is really fun. And again, we thought this could take a while. Maybe we should go ahead and start trying because, it could take years. Oh, no. We got pregnant right away again. And when I got pregnant the second time, I again had fears of capacity. I had fears of, we have this child that feels so perfect to us. It's scary to have another child. How will we feel about the second child? How will we divide a part of our heart for another little one? And once again, I remember having Oliver in my arms, William Oliver, and holding him and thinking, oh, I don't have to share what's there. My heart will grow to meet the need once again. Oh man, but having 2 boys so close in age, talk about contraction before you expand. That first year of having 2 kids that close in age, I remember having to tell myself all the time, that this has been done before you. Other people have done this. This isn't some kind of situation that is so profound that is impossible, even though it felt so many days. I remember the most glorious day in the world would be when the two babies would nap at the same time, that I could have even just minutes to use the bathroom, brush my teeth. Oh my gosh, heaven forbid, take a shower or even nap. Definitely the angriest I ever got at my child to this day is one of my funniest memories is when I had the stars aligned and both babies were napping at the same time. And I felt like the angels singing in the heavens, and I was floating on air in joy and in excitement over the peace that I might experience in the next 30 minutes. And I put Nicholas into his room time to play. We'd always have a quiet time for him. Oh, he woke up. So they were both sleeping and he woke up. And I remember telling him, I need you to play quietly in your room so that we don't wake up Oliver. And the next thing I knew, I heard something and I found Nicholas in Oliver's room, waking him up from his nap to play with him. I was livid. I felt my blood boiling over this situation. I remember thinking I need to put Nicholas in his room so that I don't overreact. I put him in his bed and I said, do not come out of here until I come back, until I come get you. I had to tend to Oliver, deal with that, deal with my disappointment and my anger, rage perhaps of not getting what I needed in that moment. And I finally calmed down and I went back into Nicholas's room to check on him. And he said, is your mean face gone? And I just remember crumbling like, oh my gosh, what? I was so embarrassed about how angry I had gotten, but I still think it's a little justified. I told him not to go in there and he ruined my moment. But there's nothing like a child to reflect back to you who you are, how you're behaving in a certain moment or in a period of your life. And, you know, perhaps what you might want to do better and how you want to adjust. We got through those years of having two boys close in age. I remember so many days feeling like I was, you know, half undressed, nursing, dealing with dirty diapers, trying to feed people, trying to put any kind of toys away. I would feel like I was on some sort of merry-go-round doing the same tasks over and over and over again, only to feel like the house looked in the same level of chaos. I looked the same level of dirty and undone. The children also did as well. I just was like, how is this life? How this feels so mind-numbing and discouraging to see the steady, constant work you do every single day and nothing to show for it. And yet, there's those moments of joy too, where your child laughs for the first time or they bond for the first time with each other, or those hugs and those giggles, or like watching them sleep, which could just make your heart melt. Seeing them explore the world for the first time or getting to show them something you love. There's just nothing that can take that away. So here we were with two kids. We're finally starting to get out of the weeds and we thought, okay, maybe it's time to have another one. I think Brian and I both secretly wished for a girl. I probably wasn't so secretive about it. I just didn't want to be public and say that I really wanted a daughter because I didn't want to have another kid in order to have a different gendered child. I knew I wanted 4 kids. I didn't care about what gender they were. However, having 2 boys, it did make me super curious and want to connect with another female. We got pregnant again almost 2 years after Oliver was born, and Abby was born almost 3 years after him. So we added Abigail Catherine to our family, and she was just such a sweet little baby. It's just so funny looking back and seeing little elements of their person showing even at the youngest ages. And there's just this wild position in their life of being the absolute expert about another human's life. I'll talk to our kids now and like tell them things about their traits, like who they were, how did they behave, like how did they wake up from a nap, what did they love, what did they like to eat, how they wanted to be held, who they liked to play with, what toy was their favorite, what kind of sensory things did they love, did they hate. It's like all of these things we were experts on. And we were just having so much joy. We moved around so many times. We settled into a home in Birmingham, Alabama with our 3 kids, painted a room pink for the first time. We were just diving into that girlhood of Abby. And we moved again when she was about 6 months old down to Florida. And then we moved to California again after she was a few years old. And I still wanted 4 children. Brian was more questioning, do we want to have 4? Like, this is kind of sweet. Like 3 is nice. And I just remember thinking like, one of us will adjust. Like either I'll feel like this is enough and I think we're done, or he'll feel open to having another child. And eventually, the latter came true. We were both like, okay, let's have another. It's so fascinating getting pregnant the first time versus like the third or fourth time. Ignorance is bliss at first, and ignorance might be bliss at second as well. But third and fourth, you're very aware of what's going on. It feels like you're already on this level of chaos that like adding more chaos won't really change too much. People always say that. They're like, once you go from like each of you being able to hold 1 child to then having to juggle 3, then it kind of doesn't matter. I don't know that that's true because they are actual human beings, each of them. So you can't say it's just not that big of a deal to throw another human being into your family fold. But when I got pregnant with Elliot, all the other pregnancies, I remember like having 0 patience to do any kind of surprise for Brian. I remember thinking like, I just want him to watch this pregnancy test with me, like come to the bathroom. I don't care. Like we're going to dive in and we're going to stare at this line together. But with Elliot, I thought, oh, maybe on this 4th try, I can give a surprise. And the funniest thing is I went into the bathroom. I took the pregnancy test. It was positive. I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. We're having a 4th child. And I thought, I'll wrap this up and I'll write a little poem for Brian. And he was getting into bed that night. And I carried the pregnancy test to him with the little poem and I let him read it. And I have no idea what I wrote. I'm sure it was super clever and beautiful. And he read it and he looked at the pregnancy test and we both had this moment of staring at each other with a smile. And we both went, yay. We were very happy. We were also very aware and wise to what we were taking on. My 4th kiddo, he just came home from school. Having Elliot, I think the difference in being pregnant that 4th time than with all of the other children was that I knew for sure that this was it. Pending any kind of accident or anything like that, like this was it. And I never had that closure all the other times. And in fact, I was not a woman who like super loved being pregnant. I felt like a waddling whale and I didn't feel comfortable in my body. And when I think about sacrificial love and like contraction in life, like where you feel like maybe your life is going smaller and you're less able to do things you want to do. That's how I think about those years, like pregnancy, nursing. I'm like, I could barely take showers, much less like have some sort of vision for my life. I knew that I was sacrificing a lot for the health and well-being of these children. It was a sacrifice I wanted to give, but there were times where I wanted to get through it. And I think so much, if I could describe parenting, everyone wants to like complain about certain phases of parenting, or like, for me, sometimes you think when something's hard, you're just like, let's get through this. Like, I can't wait for my children to be able to put on their own pajamas. Like, I can't wait for my children to pay their own car insurance. Like, whatever stage of parenting we're in, we often think about getting through it. And I think so much of parenting is about staying present. So much of life is about staying present. It's like embracing the good and beautiful stuff that we have in that moment and not wanting to rush out of it just because something feels more challenging or hard. So during those years of contraction, it was easy to want and long for expansion. And I remember having to think, this is a chapter in a season. Right now, my body does not feel like its own. Right now, I feel like my body is expanding. I'm getting stretch marks. I'm putting on weight. Like I feel like not myself in my own skin. That's a lot to tolerate. It's a lot to like sacrifice the way your body works and moves and exists in the world for another human. But remembering that it was like a contraction before an expansion helped me. Remembering that it was a season, a chapter, and that there will be other seasons and chapters helped me. But also, as I was with Elliot, my final baby, there was this different ability to stay present because I knew that it was a closing of that season, of being like, of using my body to create life, of this literal expansion and contraction within my own systems and organs and all of that. And I was able to really enjoy him in a different way. And I think now I look back and we have to apologize to our older kids a lot because of how much of our parenting was informed by fear or by wanting to control. Like I said earlier, like everything your first child does feels so profound and new and scary. And you think, oh my God, I'm going to kill them with something that I choose. And then by the time you have your last one, your youngest, you're like, they're fine. They're going to be fine. They're going to learn how to read. They're going to eat whatever they eat. It's fine. and so you as a parent are often, and this is my experience, me as a parent was so different from my first child to my last. And my life in our family system was so different. So with Elliot, I found myself being so happy to retreat to nurse him. It was like this calm, sweet moment where I could hear like explosions and toys crashing and screaming outside the other room of the other children playing. And I just would think like, he's look at this sweet child that can't yell at me or talk back. This is so lovely. But he was like the perfect experience of that chapter closing. The interesting thing I remember often in those years of having kids, thinking how I wished I had a job to go to, how I wished I had to get dressed up and look decent for something. I longed for stimulation, adult conversation. My husband was in a very outgoing, people-oriented job, and he would come home so depleted and hardly have any words left for conversation. And here I was like talking to children all day and like desperate for conversation. So our life in that phase was so mismatched and interesting. But by the time I had Elliot, I had this really cool experience of some of our friends. You know, we didn't have a whole lot of needs with like baby things because we were able to pass down so much from the older kids. And some of my friends wanted to join together to give us a gift. And I really wanted one of those glider rockers that women use to nurse their babies. I'd never had such luxuries with my other children. And I thought, oh, it'd be so amazing to have a really comfortable nursing chair that I could just have in my room. And some friends pooled together to get us a chair. Meanwhile, right as that was happening, another friend offered to let me use her glider rocker during this first year of this baby's life. And I thought, oh, that's amazing. So all of a sudden we had this gift money for a glider rocker, and I didn't need the rocker anymore. And I had for years and years thought that I really wanted to explore doing more portrait work with photography. I had taken one photography class in college, which was on film in the darkroom, and I loved it. And I dreamt of one day having a darkroom in my house and one day being a photographer for people. And what we decided, this was at the stage when Elliot was born, was right at the beginning of when digital photography was actually good. There was a lot of years where it was horrible, and I would have died if someone told me I had to shoot on digital. But this was a time where the digital cameras were really getting good, and all the editing equipment was really lovely. Programs were really helpful. So we used the glider rocker money to buy a nice digital SLR camera. And right at the time of this baby being born, I started shooting on digital all the time of my own kids. And I got to explore this creativity, this longing that I had had for so long alongside of having Elliot. And I remember thinking, I wanted to stay in my commitment of being a stay-at-home mom. I wanted my children to feel like there was always someone ready and waiting and there for them for any support and nurture that they needed. I wanted to be the one to read them bedtime stories, to wipe their skinned knees, to make another lunch of quesadillas or mac and cheese or dino nuggets, God forbid. But I also wanted more for me. And I was so excited to think about my life getting to expand beyond just being their mom. And so I started offering portrait sessions to people right in Elliot's first year of his life. And I remember putting the word out and being terrified. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like what if nobody wants this, or what if this doesn't work, or this is so embarrassing for me to say that I might be a photographer. But I showed some of my work and I asked, would anyone like a shoot for a very low rate? And 3 people immediately said yes. And from that moment, I started taking steps toward creating my first business. And in that first year, it grew phenomenally. I grew very quickly. I remember that time feeling like I'm going to work nights and weekends only. So I would do all the kid stuff all day long. And then at night I'd edit photos, or on weekends I'd book shoots. And I was juggling this idea of motherhood and personal identity. I was juggling this idea of how do I shape these children, giving them the love and attention they need, but how do I also choose myself? Motherhood is one of the most rewarding, challenging, beautiful things that I feel I have such a huge privilege to get to experience. I'm incredibly grateful to have the most incredible children. They blow my mind all the time today. I'm so thankful to, if there's anything I could encapsulate in my journey of motherhood, is it's the honest, most glorious reward to have a front row seat to someone's life like this, to get to be the number one audience person of witnessing someone's life journey is such a privilege and a beautiful path that I've gotten to be on. And the thing that I've learned in this journey of parenting is that I've gotten to go from being the number one expert on these kids' lives to slowly transitioning to being more curious about who they are, to letting them get to tell me who they are and what they like. I get to check the history I know of them with the experience they know of themselves. And that is such a beautiful letting go. It's brutal letting go and saying goodbye and like letting your children fly. It's like such a confusing identity piece, but it's also this like beautiful release as well. And as I've been able to do that, I feel like my life has also been able to expand. I think that those first days of starting a portrait photography business and what that's moved into in my life is a really profound journey. And as they grow up and become more and more autonomous and independent, I also get to do that as a full adult. Motherhood is the most defining transformation journey that I think any human can take, honestly. But our lives as people, as moms, don't stop evolving. As I grew into a mother, my dreams and desires started whispering to me. And I really feel like as I watch my children explore the world, I also got to keep growing and explore the world. And that lights me up just as much as getting to be their mom. This episode was brought to you by yours truly, Katie Prentiss. Produced and edited by the fabulous Lindsay Gensel. Our incredible Sunshine Soul theme music was created by the one and only Adam Sweeney. For more resources and transcripts, visit katieprentiss.com. That's Katie, Katie, Prentiss, Prentiss.com.